I want to start off this video by saying that I respect November Hotel's opinion about Beyond Light. I just want to show that his video isn't all that it seems. What do I mean by that? To put it simply, he misses some key reasons for Beyond Light looking the way it does and didn't try hard enough to have a truly unbiased opinion. Without further ado, let's begin. This is a tricky point to really dissect as it is all based on personal preference, but I'll still try to shed light on some of the issues I have. Right off the bat, we go to the price points, specifically the deluxe edition at $70. I did not buy the deluxe edition, and even if I did, I would still think money well spent due to the savings on season passes and exclusive loot. The thing is, you had the option to pay 40-ish USD for just the expansion, so I don't think it's fair to judge the price to content ratio on extra loot and season passes when you had access to a cheaper option. Then he referenced how there were no new maps for Crucible or Gambit, and only one quote new strike. I honestly didn't really care that there weren't many new maps at launch. There is still plenty of time for Bungie to add more in the future. Yes, it may make some game modes a bit drier, but the core of the game is the story and endgame PvE activities such as raids, dungeons, etc. We also have to factor in COVID and how it is affecting everyone and reducing the amount of content they can push per expansion. Saying that Beyond Light failed to impress as a Destiny 3 level expansion is quite honestly unfair. Yes, it would have been D3 if they had the manpower and server space to make it like that. And getting mad about Hawkmoon coming into Season of the Hunt is just splitting hairs. You're getting mad over a week's difference. You mentioned Reddit and some posts, and I feel those are 100% fair. Yes, the loot pool is going to be small in the first few days of the expansion, if not first season. I mean, they got rid of like 3 years of content, so it's expected. Personally, I thought the loot pool was annoying before Beyond Light. You got so much gear that would fill inventories and be a pain to have to constantly clear out of my postmaster to save items. I think it is foolish to expect Bungie to fill that void in the beginning of a new expansion in the middle of a pandemic. If it was a completely new game, they'd spend way more time working on that while keeping the current game alive. During my time scrolling through the Destiny the Game subreddit, I found multiple constructive solutions to problems and people explaining how to get Europa drops easier. Yet again, you mentioned the loot pool, and I'm sticking to my previous statement that it is foolish to expect Bungie to replace all of that in one expansion. I don't get that you're upset about blue world drops. Who honestly cares? They still drop higher than 1060, and you can just dismantle them once you no longer need them. And getting weapons and armor from previous seasons isn't the worst thing in the world. In the end, if you are so upset about them, don't use them. You then go on to complain about how Varix gives you a long shadow, but completely ignores that he gives you 3 new Europa guns. Not having a Void SMG, it doesn't make that much of a difference, and if you want to use anti-barrier, use Eklios with Warmind cells. It's infinitely better than Recluse if you use the right mods. And no Void hand cannon? What about Eklios hand cannon from the Prophecy dungeon? You didn't have a problem with sunsetting in the past? Like D1? How is it fair to compare sunsetting there and sunsetting now? The two were implemented completely differently, and in D2 they had to cut way more content. And no vendor refresh? Vendors haven't sold guns in any recent seasons, and nitpicking over one armor and one weapon seems like a waste of time. The reason they gave the same set to the core activities is so that any player has the equal chance to get the new armor if they hate Crucible or Gambit or vice versa, either way. I honestly don't know anyone who cares about getting reskins and rerolls. Iron Banner weapons such as Bite of the Fox are tried and true, and it isn't worth trying to make something better when it's already enjoyed. Yet again, you go back to D1 and say how Bungie couldn't keep up with how they pushed content in those days. Yeah, we didn't get flushed with loot, but we still have 4 armor sets: the Season, the Vendor, the Raid, and Europa, so that's probably enough for the average player. I have a really big issue when you say that we didn't get a bunch of new loot when we still have loot from Season of Dawn and up. It might not be inherently new weapons, but we can still use them for activities that we would have used Recluse and whatever meta for before. It seems like such a nitpicky thing to get upset about when we still have enough weapons to make it work. I can honestly only think of 2 options. One, you never even bothered to get to 1060 after hitting the soft cap. This would make sense theoretically, but simply playing core activities would reward you with pinnacles after a while, which in turn would increase your power level, even though it might not be much. This leads me to believe that my second option would be the more likely one. That is, you never even bothered to get anywhere close to 1060 and just got all of your gear upgraded once Beyond Light released. This, along with your major displease with a loot pool, makes me think that you got bored of playing and just stopped. You should have quit Destiny then, instead of hobbling through the campaign with a bad attitude just to make a video complaining 2 days after launch. Of course, they will have a power increase during the campaign. That isn't the worst thing in the world. It helps to get players to explore the world they created, and there are many easy ways to get to soft cap, even mere hours after launch. You say at some point, quote, I thought that removing all of this content was supposed to fix the game, end quote, after being faced with a bug. I was baffled by this statement because how would getting rid of old content magically fix or prevent bugs? Bungie updated a lot of their engines, including physics and lighting, with this update. So yeah, of course there are going to be some bugs that are to be expected. I'm sorry, but, quote, some arbitrary number, end quote, ruined your campaign experience? Not to be rude, but you know, why did you let that ruin the experience for you? Instead of grinding for just enough power to make it through the next mission, you could have done Lost Sectors for like 30 minutes on day one and gotten to soft cap, or at least close. You go on to say that the campaign took over 3 hours to complete, which apparently was upsetting. I didn't think it was a short campaign. It got you through the story without wasting your time. I know that the speedrunning community could do this in 2 hours or less, which would be almost the same time as running the entirety of Red War, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind together. The current world record is 2 hours and 30 minutes. And then after the campaign, you apparently didn't look for all the possible quests. You said there was only one quest after the campaign. Well, I hate to break it to you, but it was far from the last quest after the campaign was over. It has and will continue to become obvious to me that you simply didn't care enough to give Beyond Light a fair shot. I have about 15 or so quests to do on my Hunter alone, and close to like 25 on my Warlock. The endgame for this expansion has so much content to do to keep players busy until the raid drops. You continuously go back to the lack of content added in D1 compared to now, specifically the Taken King, and how it added 9 PvP maps and 3 game modes. I may be mistaken, but wasn't that just before the worst content drought in Destiny history? I don't and will never know what you truly expected to get from this expansion, but it's clear to me that it was nothing good. The Aramis fight may not have been the biggest and most grand fight, but her death was extremely poetic and makes me want to go read the lore more. And when was the last time we ever had a, like, quote, good boss fight? Gary was super easy, Panoptes was as well. Zol's probably the biggest disappointment of a boss fight I've ever had. I mean, he was a strike, and that's all I need to say about it. We didn't get to kill Riven until the raid, and the nightmares weren't anything to write home about. You would have gotten more explanation from Elsie if you just read the lore, which at this point isn't ever gonna happen. Yes, Eris didn't do much of anything, but I think it's because she realized she didn't know as much as she thought. I find it amusing to me that someone who spent over 3 hours in a campaign saying that it's over right as you begin. I don't think that Europa is that disappointing due to having many secrets that are going to be discovered and has repeatable content that can be farmed for exotic armor rolls. And the Cosmodrome wouldn't come back entirely due to the existence of the EDZ. Yet again, you complain about the price of the season pass when you haven't even played it. This mostly wraps up the direct reaction to your video, but I want to give my overview of it. I think you should have left Destiny so much earlier. You clearly have zero drive to give Year 4 a fair chance, and the video in question was uploaded on day 2, which I don't think gives anyone except people who pulled all-nighters the right to make a first impression of Beyond Light, and surely not Season of the Hunt. I mean, if you're calculating writing a script, getting footage, and doing editing, the majority of day 2 probably was just making this video. What bugs me the most is that you never acknowledge the great things about this expansion that are talked about extensively on social media. You clearly stayed with Destiny to make a biased video 2 days after launch to complain about the content you never even took the time to properly access, such as the Exo Stranger quest for fragments and aspects. There will be bugs whenever a new DLC drops, and I think it's fair to expect that. We might not be happy with it, but in time they'll get fixed. Anyway, to wrap this video up, seriously, good luck on whatever you do in the future, and I hope you find a game that you can make positive content on. For everybody else, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to sub, go ahead and hit that sub, and I'll see you later.